Much. For more on Cuba, let's bring in Cuban-born Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow Mike Gonzalez. Good morning to you.
Hi, how are you? Good morning. I wish I could be on for a better time, but
yeah, well, no, I mean, you say that. So where do you fall as this day happens? And we are going to be seeing the Cuban flag raised above the embassy this morning in D.C.
Look, this is a very odious, repressive regime that we're establishing diplomatic relations with. Let's not forget that for 50 years, the human rights of 11 million Cuban people have been canceled. I do not understand why the Obama administration has been so keen in giving away everything to establish relations with such a bad government.
You know, it's interesting you say that. How do you think that Marco Rubio obviously is very much against it? Then you have Jeff Flake and others are actually going to attend the flag raising. How do you think that's ultimately going to work out in Congress? And I asked this earlier to the governor. What are we really getting in return? Are we going to have full and unfettered access to their markets, to opportunities to invest, to actually bring capitalism and other ideas, free market democratic ideas to Cuba? Or is it going to be one of those things where, hey, you can come in sort of, kind of, and maybe have some type of access to our island? How do you think that's going to play out?
Senator, what we're doing is establishing relations with Castro's son-in-law, Luis Alberto Rodriguez Lopez Calleja, who owns about 80 to 90% of the Cuban economy. We're going to be establishing relations with him, with the Castro family, and I use the word family advisedly, more like in the Corleone sense. They own the economy. We're not going to be establishing relations with Cuba. We're going to be enriching this family and making sure that now whatever transition happens to them. So what we're going to have is a Vietnamese or Chinese-style transition, not an East European transition. President Obama has now established relations and reached out to Burma, Iran, and Cuba. This is the axis of Obama. Three repressive, odious regimes that our companies should be doing no business with.
And it's interesting you say that. How do we deal with the reparations and/or people who had their property stolen, confiscated? Is that ever going to be addressed? You think any former Cuban citizen will get their property back?
Let's talk about American assets, the assets owned by Americans, not Cuban Americans, Americans. It's $8 billion. This is the largest theft in U.S. history. It is in U.S. law. By the way, this embassy, there's a good point to make that this embassy is illegal because in the 1996 Libertad Act, it says the president cannot establish relations with Cuba unless there have been reparations on this theft, and Cuba has a democratic regime. Neither one of these things has happened. Not even John Kerry at his exuberant worst could claim this. So this $8 billion, I think they're gone.
Mike, just really quickly, Senator Marco Rubio has vowed to reverse these renewed diplomatic ties if he's elected. Whether he's elected or not, is it possible to reverse what's being done?
What is possible, I don't know. Maybe it is. I mean, we can definitely break relations again. But what can be done is not to lift the embargo. The embargo has to remain in place, and Congress has its prerogatives. When is Congress going to stand up to all the illegal acts of this president?
All right, Mike Gonzalez, thank you for joining us this morning on that.